This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. So let's start the session. Just a second. Let me check these. All the settings. Do I have everything? Is otherwise, because this is a different system, I don't know what are the settings like. But that should be okay. Now, so far, so we have been concentrating on Jenkins, which is like how do we do that CI/CD continuous integration and then continuous deployment, which is on Jenkins. Okay, and so we're going to start with Ansible today, which is talk about configuration management. So configuration management. So what is configuration management and how the configuration management works? What is that Ansible and what we use that Ansible is for? Let's talk about it. Well, so firstly, when you talk about configuration management, so nothing but we talk about the servers. Okay. So for example, I have some servers. Let's say I have some number of servers. If you have this many number of servers, then how do you manage the server configurations? So what do you mean by configurations? Let's say I like to install something like, let's say, some HTTP. So what is HTTP? As we know, HTTP is a web package, web related package. Like we have seen in Linux sessions, I have shown you those services, HTTP services. Okay, so that is a web service. But if you want to have the web service first, you install the HTTP package. Now in Linux sessions, I have shown you how to install these packages through manual commands. That means yum install Ansible, sorry, yum install HTTPD. Okay, so we have done it already. So using yum commands. Okay, so we have done it through yum commands, yum install Ansible, and those things. Not Ansible, why I'm saying Ansible, sorry, yum install HTTPD. But what if you like to install that on, let's say I have Ubuntu, then you can go with apt install or apt-get install and then HTTPD. But on Ubuntu, we don't call it HTTPD. It is Apache. The package name might be different. Anyway, but these are the commands we use it for configuration management purpose. Let's say for installations. And if you like to manage the services, we use service command. Right. So these are all comes under managing configurations, installations, uninstallations, upgradations, all these ones comes under configuration management. But how do you manage these things? So is it possible to install these configurations on these 50 servers using commands manually? That's not possible, right? So that's why we prefer configuration management tool, which is Ansible. So there we talk about Ansible. So Ansible is automation configuration management tool, which helps us to manage the server configurations. Okay, but how it works? So what is the architecture? Right, let's talk about that. And how do we set up the Ansible cluster? Okay, we talk about all these things, right? So let's start with Ansible. Now we understand the purpose of Ansible. Now let's talk about Ansible architecture or how do we set up the Ansible cluster. We talk about these ones. So moving on to first. So what was the requirement? Our requirement was configuration requirement. I want to install HTTPD. Okay. So that is our configuration requirement on number of servers. All servers belongs to from different environments, so might be from developers, might be from testers, so they might be from different environments. So I have some number of servers. Okay. And every server or every instance has an IP address, right? So what is IP address of this? 192 and then 168, 242, let's say something like 101. Okay, so the same thing, I have IPs for every instance. That's 101, and then we have 102, and so I'm just giving some random IPs for these instances. So 103 and so on. So I have some number of instances. Let's say I have 150. Okay. So these are the instances we have. So we have about 50 instances. Okay. Then, so what is the configuration requirement now? The configuration requirement is install HTTP. That's a configuration requirement. Okay. Now, how are you going to install this HTTP on all these instances? Now, so what we call instances, what we call these servers. Now, in terms of Ansible, so we call them Ansible host, or you can call them Ansible nodes, or else Ansible agents. Ansible host, nodes, or agents. Okay. So what exactly Ansible host, nodes, or agents is? So the servers belongs to different environment and where we're going to manage our configurations. So those are nothing but Ansible host or nodes. So what's next? Then we have Ansible server. Now this is some server and this is a dedicated server. Actually, it's a different server. This is not for developers. This is not for some other purpose. This is only for DevOps engineer purpose. This is my server. On this server, I install. So I install Ansible. I install Ansible on it. Once you install Ansible package or Ansible tool on this server is what we call Ansible control machine or Ansible server. There we have Ansible server ready, or you can say Ansible control machine. You can call it Ansible server, whatever. Okay, Ansible control machine or Ansible server, that's okay, whatever it is. So we have Ansible server ready or Ansible control machine ready, and then we have nodes. Now take the requirement. So what is the requirement? Configuration requirement: install HTTPD. That's the requirement. How do I install that HTTPD from my Ansible server? On Ansible server, now I'm going to write a playbook. So what is a playbook? The playbook is nothing but a script, so which is written in YAML script and which has your list of configurations. Has my list of configurations. So what do you mean by configurations? Now, what is our configuration requirement was? Install HTTP. Okay, this is our configuration requirement. Install HTTP. Okay, and then so that is what is the playbook. Playbook is nothing but it's a script written in YAML format, and which is written in YAML format has your list of configurations. That's what is a playbook. Okay. Now the next thing is let's run the playbook. So where is my playbook? My playbook I have created on Ansible control machine, right? I created on Ansible control machine, and then once your playbook is ready, and the next thing is let's run the playbook. So why we run the playbook? Since the configuration requirement is mentioned in the playbook. Now let's run it. So I'm going to run it. But how the playbook will be executed or will be run on the Ansible nodes. So Ansible follows a kind of a mechanism. We call that mechanism is push mechanism. Ansible follows the push mechanism. Okay. So once you have playbook ready, then from my Ansible server, I'm going to run a command. So what is the command? The command is Ansible -playbook and then your playbook name. Now you run that command. So when you run this command, your playbook will be pushed onto all the nodes of Ansible nodes. So we have Ansible nodes. Yes, for all the nodes, you have playbook run. That's a command. Ansible-playbook, and then your playbook name. And when I run this command, so you will be pushing your playbook on all the hosts. So what happens once the playbook has been pushed? Whenever the playbook is pushed, and the playbook will be executed on the host, and so there you have configuration install. What is the configuration? Install httpd, and there is your configuration. That's your configuration. Right? So why the configuration is install httpd install? That's because of, so you have, so push the playbook. Okay, right. And then so the playbook is pushed, and then you have Ansible configuration is done. That means your httpd install. Okay, this is a simple push mechanism. So that is perfect, very simple mechanism. It's a push mechanism. But the question arises, now the playbook is written in YAML script, and I have pushed the playbook using this command. The playbook was pushed. When the playbook is pushed, the playbook got executed on the host side, and so that it has installed the configuration. Okay, that is the concept. Now, how your Ansible nodes understand that particular YAML script? Okay, how Ansible understand that YAML script? Right. So Ansible nodes don't understand the YAML script, whereas Ansible server understands the YAML script. The reason is I have installed Ansible on the server side, but Ansible nodes or hosts don't understand the Ansible. I mean the YAML script. But if Ansible nodes don't understand the YAML script, how we can execute the playbook? How we can run the playbook? Okay, but so, and there comes Ansible playbook execution on the nodes. The playbook execution on the nodes, if you want to run it, and your nodes must have, so something else is installed. What they need to have installed, they must have Python installed. Python installed. If the nodes don't have Python installed, so you won't be able to push your playbooks, or you won't be able to run your playbooks. Okay, so that is not possible. So in order to make sure you run your playbooks, so make sure you have your Python installed on all the nodes. But in our example, I have 50 nodes, right? I have 50 nodes. So if you have 50 nodes, and how all the nodes do I install Python? So do I need to install Python manually? So not required. So you don't need to install Python manually. See, almost all the OSs or Linux flavors, so Ubuntu, RHEL, CentOS, all these OSs, different flavors, they have Python installed by default. Okay, you don't need to install Python again. So Ansible has taken advantage of that Python default installation. Then, so they have implemented their own YAML script, and then, so you will be able to run your playbooks or YAML scripts on Python. I mean, on your nodes. Okay, so that is how Ansible works. So if you want to run any playbook, so your nodes must have Python installed. Okay, so that's the concept of Ansible push mechanism. Now, so back to the Ansible installation. I did install Ansible on the server side, right? I didn't install Ansible on the server side. But do I need to install Ansible on the host side? See, Ansible has only one package, which is Ansible package. They don't have Ansible server packages. They don't have Ansible host packages or node packages. No, it's only Ansible. So wherever Ansible is installed, and that is what we call Ansible server. Okay, so there is nothing called Ansible host package. So on Ansible host, you don't install any packages of related to Ansible. Okay, so that is what we call Ansible is agentless. So this is the major advantage of Ansible. Ansible is agentless. Okay, so now remember that advantage, and we take the compare. We take all the points at the end of this architecture session. So we take the all the points again, and we'll be comparing with other tools like Chef and Puppet. Okay, we'll be doing some comparisons. Well, so let's talk about more points of Ansible. So playbooks only has your list of configurations. That's correct. But what if I want to push number of playbooks? So when I say playbook means, so do I always run only one single playbook? No. So we need to run some multiple playbooks. Okay. So that's one thing. Or else, so I have these 50 nodes. On these 50 nodes, and some of the nodes might be from developer environment, and some of the nodes from the test environment, and some are from pre-production or production. So I have different nodes, so from different environments. If that is the case, so how do I create the playbooks? Right? How do I create the playbook? Now, so when you talk about this playbook, now here, so we talk about roles in terms of environments. So what is a role? So role is nothing but set of playbooks. I'm creating a role for a role. I'm creating a role. So what is a role? Dev role. Dev role will be having so a set of playbooks. Let's say I have some playbooks. These playbooks for the purpose of your nodes purpose. For what nodes? Your developer nodes. Okay. Have another role for test role. And these roles or these playbooks are for the purpose of and have some production role. Okay. But for let's say I have so some I've created different roles, environment purposes, and wherever I want to, so here I want to put, for example, take these nodes. So these belongs to developer environment. So whenever I want to push the playbooks onto developer environments, I take the playbooks from developer role, and then so I start pushing playbooks for the developer environments. Okay. So for example, I have some other nodes. For these nodes, I want to push some playbooks. Then I take the roles and I take the playbooks from test role and same as your production. Okay. So, but the question is, here we have number of nodes, right? Number of nodes. And whenever I push a playbook, let's say for example, this is my role, developer role. From this role, I want to push about 6 playbooks to some 20 nodes. Let's say some 20 nodes. Then I run this command, Ansible playbook, your playbook name. But we don't have a playbook, right? We have a role then. Hope that was clear. Now the question is, whenever I push my playbooks, how Ansible knows what roles and what playbooks needs to be pushed onto what set of nodes. Is it clear? Right. So the answer is there we create a master flow. We create a master playbook. Okay. So this master playbook contains your role name. So what role? Your dev role. Okay. Plus your number of playbooks from the role. Let's say about 5 playbooks. And then, so nodes. What nodes? Your nodes, your node IPs, you can say. Okay. Or else instead of saying node IP, your environment name. So what is my environment name? So let's say it is dev environment. You mentioned the environment name over there. So this is what exactly your master playbook contains. So how the master playbook differs from the normal playbook? Now, master playbook has your all configurations which you want to push it onto the nodes. So these playbooks, we define them in roles. And then whereas master playbook has list of nodes, roles, and then playbooks. Okay, so that's the difference. And once you have this master playbook ready, as usual, you can run the same command again, and -n playbook and the playbook name. So, but this time you're running this master playbook, but the command is same. So master playbooks can be number of master playbooks, and your master playbook name also can be anything. There is no naming conventions for these playbooks. Okay, so we can create number of playbooks. So let's say I want to create a playbook for dev test role, master playbook. I want to create a master playbook for production role, or else I can create multiple master playbooks. Okay. So for the same environment, that's also possible. So that's how your playbook versus normal playbook differ. Okay. Well, now moving on to, hope the concept is clear, master playbook concept. So understand these terms. Okay, let me just repeat what we have discussed so far. The first thing we have discussed was Ansible is agentless. That means on the agent side or host side, you don't need to install any Ansible related configurations. That's the first thing. Okay, and the second thing is on Ansible server, you install a package called Ansible package. Okay, so once you install Ansible package, you have Ansible control machine or Ansible server ready, and then we start writing YAML script and we push the playbooks to the nodes. And so usually we create playbooks within roles. Roles are nothing but a list of playbooks. There we have list of playbooks. So why we have a roles concept? So that we can create roles for different environments: dev, test, production, pre-production. Now, once you have roles and playbook study, and then there comes master playbook. So master playbook has your your list. Actually, master playbook has the list. Okay, what do you mean by list? List means you're pushing a playbook. So what is my playbook is? My playbook name is master playbook. Then you push the playbook. What is the command to push the playbook? That is a command. So when you push your playbook, so to the nodes, but your Ansible has to know what playbooks it has to be pushed, and from what roles, and to what environments. But how Ansible knows these things? Ansible knows them with the help of master playbook concepts. Master playbook has your all the defined, so predefined list actually. That means roles. What is the role name? What playbooks, and then to what environment. That's a master playbook. Whereas a normal playbook contains like notations. What do you go manage on the nodes? What is your configuration? That's your configurations. Okay, so that is how the playbook versus master playbook so differs. Okay. Hope the concept is clear. Okay, the playbook versus master playbook. Right. Now moving to Hope the question was answered, I guess. Perfect. Now, moving on to, so let's talk about the Ansible cluster. So this is our Ansible cluster. That's our Ansible cluster. So what do you mean by a cluster? That's my cluster, Ansible cluster. So what is this cluster then? What is an Ansible cluster? And you see, all your nodes are communicating with your Ansible server, right? So they're connected within an range, I mean, within the what we call kind of environment. You can say this is my Ansible environment. So they're communicating. Your Ansible is communicating with your host. The communication happens. So these communications happen between the master, or you can say Ansible control machine, and then Ansible nodes only within that cluster. For example, so there is some other node, so some other server, let's say this is some other server. Okay. On these servers, I want to push a playbook. These are nodes. Okay, can I push the playbook to them? No, not possible. Why? These nodes are not within the cluster, so they're not within the cluster. Since those nodes are not within the cluster, so Ansible communication does not happen. That means your server node communication does not happen because they are not in the cluster. Okay, but how do you set up that cluster? Or else, how do you set up Ansible nodes and then Ansible server? How the communication has been set up between them. Okay. Now, here we talk about the cluster setup or Ansible architecture setup. When you talk about this setup, so let me give you an example. Take an example. This is my new Ansible node. Okay, this is a new instance, and the instance IP address is, let's say, 192.168.242, and which is 151. So this is my new instance, which I want to add it as a part of the Ansible cluster. How do you set up that cluster? How do you set up this node as a part of your cluster? Simply, how to set up a node? That is a concept. Now, whenever you want to set up a node, so you have two steps to follow. So what is the first step? The first step is, on my Ansible server, I'm going to generate an SSH key. Okay, we know how to generate the keys. So SSH-keygen, SSH-keygen, and so once you run this command, keygen command on Ansible node, so Ansible server, then your key will be generated for the Ansible server. We know these SSH key concepts, and then we copy the keys, copy that key to the node. Now SSH key is being copied. SSH-key copy, right? We remember the commands. That is the second command. Once the key is copied, then the key will be existing. Our key will be copied to the Ansible node. Okay, that is the first step as a part of the Ansible setup or Ansible cluster setup. That's the first step. And what is the second step? Okay, let's talk about the second step. And again, on Ansible server, you have a file called vi, and then under etc Ansible, this is a path. There you have a file called host file. That's a file name. This is the text file. That's I'm using vi. That's a file. Okay. So this file has your list of node IPs. So what is the node IP? So the node IP address was 182. So 168, 168, and then so 242, and then 151. That's IP address. The same way you mention all the node IP address. Okay. So any node you want to connect as a part of the Ansible cluster. So we set up that as a part of the cluster. And then, so what are the steps? The steps are two steps we have. You copy the key of your Ansible server to the host. That's the first step. And the second step is, so you have Ansible, in Ansible inventory, we call them inventory file, or you can call them host file. In the host file, you add your IP address. Okay, you add the IP address. But so now you see, we call this file as an inventory file. That's inventory file. And the inventory file of on Ansible server has your list of IPs. So whether you have 100 nodes, 200 nodes, all the IPs needs to be entered. So how do you enter them? Just type the IP address. Okay. So for example, I have 192, 168, and then 242, and then let's say 101. Enter the IP address. Okay. So this is what is your IP address. Okay. So that's inventory file. If the inventory file does not have your IP listed, then your Ansible configuration or Ansible communication between server and the node does not happen. So that's your Ansible cluster set. Okay. Well, any questions on this Ansible architecture? So this is a very, very simple architecture and which is very easy to understand. So there is nothing complicated. Remember these two steps whenever you want to set up an Ansible. So node, and you have two steps. The first setup is SSH key copy to the node, whatever the node that is. And second step is in the inventory file. What is inventory file part? etc Ansible. File name is host is a file name, and that file you just enter the IPs, and then you have set up them. But how do you set up the Ansible server? The Ansible server we set up like usual normally. That means install Ansible tool on it. Okay. So this is what is your setup is done using Ansible. Well, and so here you can have your nodes. So these are all the nodes, right? You can have your nodes, or you can have your Ansible server can be running on different you can have EC2 instances, you can have your virtual instances. So they might be running with any type of platforms, local platforms or your remote platforms. That means cloud platforms. Okay, so that is possible. Right. So let me give you some comparisons with other tools. So let's compare with Puppet actually. Puppet, and then Chef. Also we have Ansible. So Puppet, Chef, Ansible are your configuration management tools. And so initially, so we had Puppet, and then after some days, Ansible, sorry, Chef was introduced, and now it is Ansible. Okay, well, so let's compare with these three. So among these, in these comparisons, so which one we prefer? So we prefer Ansible. Why we prefer these Ansible among these three tools? The best reason is that's a push mechanism. Ansible works with push mechanism. So what is push mechanism? We know that. So we have seen that whole architecture, the picture. So Ansible server pushes the playbooks from server to the nodes. Okay. So, and then how about Chef and then Puppet? They're quite opposite to it, which is pull mechanism. Okay. So what is that pull mechanism then? How it works? So in Chef, we are pushing the playbooks from server to the host. We are pushing it. So this goes server to the host. But in pull mechanism, this comes the other way. Your number of hosts and all the hosts, they so try to pull the playbooks from server. This is the push mechanism, sorry, pull mechanism. The requests are coming from the host or agents, right? Requests are coming from the agents in pull mechanism. But whereas in Ansible, it's a push concept. The request goes out to the instances, right? That's a difference. Now, which one is preferred? Is it push mechanism is preferred or pull mechanism? So I prefer push. Why not pull? So look at here. I have number of nodes. I have about 150 nodes. Let's say I have about 200 nodes. Some number of nodes I have. If all these nodes are sending a pull request same time to the one single server, so what will be the drawback? Right? So the drawback is it is load issue. Correct? So there will be a load issue. That means your server might not be able to handle those many number of requests. Right? So that's the issue. So in order to avoid these kind of load balancing issues, then we prefer Ansible, which is a push mechanism. Okay. So that's how your Ansible push mechanism, pull mechanism are different. Right. Right. So Ansible has then one more advantage, which is agentless. Okay. So what is agentless? Like I said, on Ansible nodes, you don't install any Ansible related packages, right? You don't install any Ansible packages. But on the server, you install Ansible package. That's for server purpose, but not on the host. Right? Now, if you talk about this again, for example, I take Chef or Puppet. Okay. In Chef or Puppet tools, so you have a concept called installing node side packages. Okay, node side packages. So what do you mean by node side packages? Now, so we have these nodes, right? We have these nodes, and what do we do? These nodes, we install some Chef related packages. For example, on Chef, I install Chef client package on the nodes. In Puppet, we install Puppet client packages on the nodes. But how many nodes I have? I have number of nodes. I have 150 nodes. If you have 150 nodes, on every node you install your Chef client or Puppet client package. So that is a drawback. Okay, so here, so that's a drawback. So in Chef, it is Chef client package, you install it. So whereas in Puppet, so it is Puppet client. Puppet client. So that's Puppet and then Chef. So that is a drawback. So for example, I want to set up a new node in Puppet or Chef. Let's take this as a new node in Puppet and Chef. How do you do that? First, on these nodes, I install its relevant packages. I install either Chef client or Puppet client packages. Okay. Once I install these packages, then your cluster setup will be ready. That means this client can communicate with your Puppet client, Puppet server or Puppet server or Chef server. So that is a drawback. Okay. So, but installing these client packages, it's not an easy task. you need to do a lot of configurations behind on each and every node. Even though it's a one-time activity, but so it takes some time to set up the nodes. But if you want to set up a node in Ansible cluster, and you can do it within about 30 seconds, it's very easy because we know the two steps. What are the steps? You just copy the key onto the host, and that can be done within about 5 to 10 seconds. It's very easy. And second thing is open the file on the host and enter the IP address. That's it. These are the two steps. Okay. And moving on to next, other differences. You have Ansible, right? And so advantages, what are they? We talk about playbooks. Yes. So we call them playbooks in Ansible, and whereas in Chef, so we call them recipes, and in Puppet we call them manifest. And then in Ansible, so we have roles concept like collection of playbooks, and in Chef we have cookbooks, and then so in Puppet it is classes. And we write the playbooks in YAML script in Ansible, and whereas in Chef, so we write them in DSL Ruby. Okay, so DSL means domain specific language. So is it a Ruby actually? This is not exactly the Ruby script. We call them DSL Ruby. That means domain specific Ruby. Okay, domain specific language. And then so which domain? That's for Chef domain. So that means those scripts are specifically designed for the Chef purpose. And how about in Puppet? We call them DSL Ruby. But again, which domain specific? Puppet domain specific. Okay. Right. And so next is yeah, the easiness. How easy to set up Ansible? So you can easily set up Ansible. So it's easy to set up. Also, even the architecture, we have seen the architecture, right? This architecture, it's a very, very simple, easy architecture. There's no complicated things behind it. It's all straightforward. Nodes, server, and then so you just set up the server by following two commands: SSH key copy, and then inventory file. That's it. Then you have your nodes server file. That's easy architecture. And then even the easy architecture. Setup and architecture both are easy. But initially, when the Puppet was introduced, Puppet has a bit complicated setup. But architecture is so pretty much similar to the Ansible architecture. So it's easy architecture. So something like, so you have Ansible nodes and then Ansible server. Same as in Puppet, we have Puppet nodes and then Puppet server. Architecture is simple. But if you want to set up the cluster setup, Puppet cluster setup, it's not so easy. That is a time-taking process. That means a normal user can't understand this architecture as simple as Ansible. And so that's the reason Chef has come into the picture. They have made that so setup easy. So did I say 1 second? So complex setup here, correct? Complex setup. And then in Chef, it is an easy setup. But so unfortunately, it's a complex architecture. Architecture is complicated. Yeah. So Chef, not simple as it looks. So it has, so apart from this servers, now we have a server, right? Let's assume that this is my Chef server and we have Chef nodes. Okay. Chef server, Chef nodes. Apart from this, so we have some more elements as a part of the cluster. Okay, we have more elements added to the cluster. So in the background, you have some more elements added to the cluster. So that is why architecture of Chef has become complicated, right? So that's why. So instead of Chef, I would prefer Ansible. Okay. So these are the advantages of Ansible, and majorly these are the advantages. Push mechanism, it is agentless. Okay. These are the major advantages, and of course the other advantages are setup, easy architecture. Okay. Right. Now, so now you can try this from today. You can try to install them on EC2 instances. That's not a problem. You can have Ansible server, you can have Ansible nodes, everything. You can have server and the nodes, everything will be, you can have it on EC2 or your local instances. Anything is possible. You want to set up a local cluster, or you want to set a cloud cluster. So it's all okay. But I will be doing it on cloud. Okay, I will be doing everything on cloud. So now, what are the steps if I want to set up this server? Let's try to set up the server for today. And node setup I will be showing it practically in the next session. Okay. So very simple steps. And if you are doing it on Ubuntu, so first go with apt update your repository, apt update. And the second step is very simple as usual. You can go with, so what is that? What is that? Apt install Ansible. Okay. So this is for Ubuntu. That's for Ubuntu. But if you want to do it on Ubuntu, and even if you want to do it on CentOS, so it's also simple. First go with yum update, and then you can go with yum install. Sorry, yum install, and this is on CentOS. You can get the setup ready, very simple. That's for CentOS. And how about in RHL? In RHL, the steps are a little bit different. So these steps I will be showing that in the next session. So I will be showing this next session. So the reason is we need some URLs actually. So to install that RHL and Ansible on RHL, we need some URLs. With the help of those URLs, we can install Ansible on RHL. So I will be explaining these steps in the next session. We'll talk about the next session. Okay, fine. So and as usual, you have AWS sessions tomorrow, and you will be getting a link to attend AWS sessions. So tomorrow, day after tomorrow. Okay. I think Monday we don't have a session on Monday. Monday is holy, okay. And then we don't have a session on Monday. So I'm just letting you know in advance. Yeah. So any questions on this architecture? So again, those who have any doubts, so regarding the Jenkins, so those rest of 2 sessions of Jenkins I will be covering in the future. So nothing to worry. Okay. So like I said, I had some issues with my existing laptop. I have changed my laptop today. So that's the reason we have started with new tool, which is Ansible. So those 2 sessions I will be covering up in the future. Nothing to worry about anything. Only the Groovy scripts are there. I will be taking those scripts. So any questions, anyone? But today you just have your server setup ready. You can do it on Ubuntu or CentOS. Just get the server setup ready. And for the confirmation, once you have the server setup ready, and then run this command, Ansible hyphen version. If you're able to get the version, I think it's Ansible version, hyphen version. If you're able to get the version, Ansible is successfully installed. Okay. So I think I already have explained that 3 times. master playbook versus a normal playbook. So normal playbook contains your list of configurations. Okay. Normal playbook contains list of configurations. Your master playbook contains. So what? So you want to push some multiple playbooks, right? Then what playbook you want to push? So where is the playbook is defined, and where what onto what environment you want to push it. Okay. So your master playbook has those kind of configurations. The list actually. Okay. If you don't understand it, so that's okay. So because it's like I have repeated 3 times, that's not a problem. I can repeat it, but still you might not be able to understand it. So you can wait. I will be explaining practically the practical sessions. Okay, there's nothing to worry about right now. So this is just a first session. So all things will be clear in the practical part. Yeah. Any more questions?
Sir, we are first cluster settings.
Sorry.
So we are setting first cluster settings, sir.
Correct. Of course. So if you don't have the cluster setup ready, so we cannot run the playbooks, right?
Okay, okay, sir. Like that VPC settings, like that.
Sorry.
Cluster like that VPC, sir. In VPC, public subject to private subject. This is also like that server and nodes. This is also VPC setting like that.
Yeah, that's right. Same. So like within the cluster, that means we set up that within the VPC. So we set up that within the VPC. Yes, that's a cluster setup. Yeah. Anyone else? Any more questions? No questions. Thank you then. I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thanks.